He's gone, so I knew I needed to step up. And then I started to do a lot more. I started to try to, get out that comfort zone and just be more of that guy. I wouldn't say put more pressure on myself. I ain't worried about nothing else but the only one thing, and that's winning. With football no longer feeling every Sunday of my life, I find myself remembering the game differently. When I was playing, everything was immediate. The snap, the hands in my chest, the quarterback somewhere behind the wall in front of me. You did not have much time to think about history when another man was trying to move you out of the way. But distance changes things. People ask me about greatness, and I understand why. Football loves numbers, sacks, rings, awards, records that stay printed long after the stadium has gone quiet. That is not how I remember the greatest players. I remember the men who changed what everyone else had to do, the ones quarterbacks searched for before the snap, the ones coaches built entire Sundays around stopping, the ones who could make another professional feel for a moment that he had run out of answers. If I had to choose 5 players who represent greatness to me, I would start there. And the man at number 1, he did more than dominate football. He changed what came after him. Number 5, Deion Sanders. There are some defensive players you understand by watching what happens when the ball comes to them. Deion was different. To understand him, you had to watch what happened when the ball never came his way. Go back to the 1994 season. San Francisco had brought him in for 1 year, and by the time they reached Super Bowl 29 against San Diego, everybody already knew where number 21 was. He finished that game with an interception, and the 49ers won 49-26. But the thing that stays with me is bigger than one play. It is the way an offense had to think before the quarterback ever let the ball go. That is what I respect about a corner like Deion. A defensive lineman lives close to the violence, hands on you every snap, guards leaning on your shoulders, centers turning towards you. When the offense is worried because you can feel the extra body coming, a cornerback feels that fear differently. If he is good enough, the quarterback simply looks somewhere else. Deion could make a section of the field feel closed. That takes discipline people do not always notice. Everybody remembers the speed. Everybody remembers the returns, the celebrations, the personality. I notice the patience. A great corner has to sit there knowing the offense is trying to make him blink first. One false step and the whole field opens behind you. Deion could play with all that confidence and still stay under control. During that 1994 season, he intercepted 6 passes and returned 3 of them for touchdowns. Those numbers tell you he punished mistakes. What the numbers cannot show is how many throws never happened because a quarterback decided the risk was not worth it. That part feels familiar to me. When you become a problem on defense, the game starts changing around you. Protection slides, a back stays in, a guard looks inside before he looks anywhere else. You learn that domination is not always making the play yourself. Sometimes it is forcing the offense to abandon the play it wanted before the snap. That is what Deion reminds me of. He played far away from where I made my living, but the principle was the same. Make them account for you. Make them uncomfortable. Make them spend part of their week trying to solve something that may not have a clean answer. I put Deion at number 5 because greatness can begin with fear, and few defenders ever made avoidance look like respect the way he did. Still, there is another kind of presence, one that does not close one side of the field. It takes over the whole defense. Number 4, Ray Lewis. When I go back and watch Super Bowl 35, there's one thing I notice before the tackles, before the collisions, before the crowd really has time to settle into the game. Ray Lewis is talking. He is pointing, moving people, looking from one side of the formation to the other. Sometimes the ball has not even been snapped yet, and you can already feel that Baltimore knows where it wants to be. That always stayed with me. A defensive tackle sees football from a crowded place. Most of my world was a few feet wide. A guard, a center, maybe a tackle coming down. You learn to read weight, hands, shoulders. Your information comes fast and close. Ray had to see everything. A middle linebacker cannot live inside one matchup. He has to recognize formation, motion, the depth of the running back, what the guards are telling him, where the tight end is moving. Then he has to communicate it while 10 other men are waiting for the same answer. That is a different kind of pressure. In that Super Bowl against the Giants, Baltimore gave up 7 points. Ray was everywhere, but what impresses me now is not simply where he finished the play. It is how often that defense seemed to arrive together. That does not happen by accident. People remember Ray for the emotion. I understand that. The introductions, the voice, the way he could make a stadium feel smaller when he stepped onto the field. But emotion without preparation burns out quickly. What made him special was that the energy had direction. He had studied enough to know where to send it. I did not lead that way. I was never the guy who needed to give a long speech before every game. Most of the time I wanted to work, line up, and let the next snap say whatever needed to be said. For a long time, I probably thought leadership had to look one way or the other. Either you were loud like Ray, or you led quietly. I learned it is more complicated than that. Leadership is whether the people beside you trust that you are ready. Ray Lewis taught me that when I watched the way those Ravens moved with him. He did not make every tackle. He did not have to. His presence made other people faster because they believed in what they were seeing. That is why I have him at number 4. Deion could make a quarterback erase one side of the field. Ray could make an entire defense feel like one body. But the next man showed me something else. Sometimes one body is enough to wreck the whole plan. Number 3, J. Watt. I came into the league in 2014, and J. Watt was already the kind of player a young defensive lineman could not ignore. That matters to me. The older legends were men I could study on old film. J was happening right in front of us. Every week there seemed to be another reminder that a defensive lineman did not have to stay inside the little box people drew around his position. I remember that Buffalo game in Houston from that season. Early in the third quarter, Buffalo was moving the ball near the goal line. J stopped his rush, read the quarterback, got himself into the passing lane and intercepted the ball. Then a man built to fight tackles and guards turned around and ran 80 yards the other way for a touchdown. That play tells you more about him than a sack total ever could. People see a defensive lineman and usually think strength first. I understand why. Strength matters. But when you have played down there, you start noticing other things. Hands, balance, eyes, knowing when the blocker is leaning too far, knowing when the quarterback wants the ball out quickly, knowing when to stop chasing the man in front of you and become part of the passing lane instead. J understood the whole picture. That is what made playing defensive line against a guy like him look almost unfair. You could assign a tackle to him, you could slide protection, you could send help, but now you were already changing something else in your offense because of one defender. I understand that language. There's a strange kind of respect in being double teamed. Nobody says anything to you. Nobody has to. You line up, see 2 bodies turning towards you, and you know what the other sideline spent part of his week discussing. JJ lived in that world. He finished that season with 20.5 sacks, but when I think about what made him great, I do not begin there. I think about how many different ways he could ruin what an offense wanted to do. Watching a player from your own era do that teaches you something uncomfortable. There is always another level. You can be strong and still need better hands. You can be quick and still need better eyes. You can win one snap and still have no effect on the next 10. J made the standard feel complete. That is why I have him at number 3. He showed my generation of defensive linemen that disruption was bigger than getting to the quarterback. It was making the offense account for you before the play even existed. But when I wanted to understand where that kind of power came from, I had to go farther back. And there was one man whose hands could move, an offensive lineman like the ground underneath him had disappeared. Number 2, Reggie White. I cannot sit here and pretend Reggie White is somebody I remember from across the line of scrimmage. I was a kid when he was taking over games. I came to understand him later. Film will do that to you. Once you have spent enough years fighting guards and tackles yourself, old plays start looking different. You stop watching the quarterback. You watch the feet, the hands, the weight of the blocker. You notice the little moment when one grown man realizes another grown man has control of him. There's a lot of that on Reggie White's film. I keep coming back to Super Bowl 31 against New England. Green Bay was playing in New Orleans, and late in that game, Reggie took over. He finished with 3 sacks, including 2 on consecutive plays. Watch those plays as a defensive lineman, and you see something deeper than power. Reggie had that hump move everybody talks about. People describe it like he simply threw offensive tackles out of the way, and sometimes it looked that simple. It was not. There was timing in it, leverage. He would get a blocker committed field where the man's weight had gone, then use those hands to move him somewhere his feet could no longer save him. That is a terrible feeling for an offensive lineman. What makes it even worse is knowing it might be coming. That is the part I respect most. Anybody can surprise somebody once. Real mastery is when a man studies you all week, knows what you want to do, prepares his body to stop it, and then Sunday comes and you still get there. I learned that lesson in my own way. Early in your career, you want moves. You want answers for everything. If he does this, I do that. If he sets one way, I counter another way. Eventually, you understand that having 10 moves means very little if none of them belong to you. The great ones have something they can return to when everybody in the stadium knows what is coming. Reggie had that. And when I watched him, I understood why defensive linemen still talk about him differently. He had speed, he had technique, he could rush from different places, but underneath all of it was something simple. he could move another man against his will. There is nowhere to hide from that in the trenches. That is why Reggie White is number 2 for me. J. Watt showed how many different ways a defensive lineman could disrupt the game. Reggie showed what happens when one way becomes nearly impossible to stop. But number 1 goes beyond mastering a position. That man made everybody else reconsider how the position across from him had to be played. Number 1, Lawrence Taylor. There is a moment on old Lawrence Taylor film that I always notice. The ball has not moved yet. The quarterback comes to the line, looks at the defense, and somewhere in that process, his eyes find number 56. That tells me almost everything. Go back to the 1986 season. The Giants eventually reached the NFC Championship against Washington at Giant Stadium and won 17-0. Taylor was in the middle of the greatest season of his career, but when I watch those games, I am less interested in the final number beside his name than in what happened before the snap. Everybody had to know where he was. That is power. I made my living closer to the middle. When I lined up inside, I could feel protection change. A center would turn. A guard would become slower leaving for another assignment. Sometimes another body appeared before I had finished dealing with the first one. You learn to recognize respect that way. Lawrence Taylor received it from the edge. His first step was violent, but speed alone does not explain him. He could bend around a tackle. He could go through him. He could chase a play from behind after the offense thought it had escaped him. Soon the question was no longer whether the tackle could handle him. The question became how much help the offense could afford to send, keep it back in, use the tight end, turn the protection, make sure the quarterback knows where he is before looking anywhere else. Every one of those choices costs something. That is the lesson I take from Taylor. A defender does not have to make the tackle to affect the play. Sometimes the greatest pressure you create is the option an offense gives up because it is afraid of what you might do. I understand that more now than I ever could have watching football as a kid. When 2 men turn toward you instead of 1, part of the offense has already changed. When an entire protection has to consider you, you have entered a different kind of territory. That is why Lawrence Taylor is number 1 for me. Deion Sanders could make a quarterback avoid a piece of the field. Ray Lewis could give a defense 1 heartbeat. J.J. Watt could destroy a play in almost any way you asked him to. Reggie White could show a blocker what was coming and beat him anyway. Taylor went 1 step further. The game on the other side had to adjust to him. There are great players who master their position. There are rare players who make everybody around that position think differently. When I have to separate number 2 from number 1, that is where I draw the line. Reggie White showed me what mastery looked like. Lawrence Taylor showed football that mastery could force the game itself to move. When I look at those 5 names together, they do not really look alike. Deion lived on the outside where 1 mistake could become 6 points in a second. Ray stood in the middle and made 10 other men believe they were seeing the same game. J. showed how many different ways 1 defensive lineman could ruin a Sunday. Reggie taught me that when a technique truly belongs to you, knowing it is coming does not always help. And Lawrence Taylor showed what happens when 1 defender becomes important enough to change the decisions made around him. That is what greatness means to me now. It is not the noise after the play. It is what happens before it. The extra blocker, the quarterback looking your way, the coach crossing something off the call sheet, the opponent spending all week preparing for a problem that may still be waiting for him on Sunday. I spent my career trying to create that kind of problem. I never needed to become Deion Sanders, Ray Lewis, J.J. Watt, Reggie White, or Lawrence Taylor. Football does not ask you to become somebody else. It asks whether you can become enough of yourself that the other team has to notice. Years from now, numbers will still be sitting in record books. But the players we truly remember are the ones who changed what everybody else had to do.